It started with a whisper, the kind that didn't belong in a house full of people. A whisper that only one person heard. "Come with me and don't tell anyone." The woman's voice was calm, too calm. The young slave standing in front of her hesitated for just a second, because something in her eyes didn't feel right. Not anger, not kindness, something colder, something hidden. And that hesitation, it may have been the last moment he could have walked away. Before we go deeper, if you enjoy dark, true style stories like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe to Night Archive, because what you're about to hear only gets worse. The plantation looked peaceful from the outside. Wide fields, quiet air, workers moving slowly under the sun. Everything exactly how it was supposed to be. But inside the main house, something had changed. For weeks, people had noticed it. The owner's wife, Alina, had started acting differently. At first, it was small things. She stopped speaking at dinner, stopped looking people in the eyes. Sometimes she would stand near the windows for hours, just staring into the distance, like she was waiting for something or someone. And then the sounds started. Late at night, when everyone else was asleep, soft footsteps in the hallway, doors opening, then closing, and sometimes very faint knocking. Not on the front door, not on the walls, but from somewhere deeper inside the house. No one talked about it openly, because on a plantation like this, silence wasn't just normal, it was survival. But the slaves noticed everything, and they all agreed on one thing. Whatever was happening, it had something to do with her. Alina, the woman who once barely stepped outside her room, was now walking the house at night like she owned something no one else could see. And that's where the boy comes in. His name was Samuel. Young, quiet, observant, the kind of person who survived by staying invisible. Until the day she noticed him. It happened in the middle of the afternoon. No warning, no reason. She simply called his name, and when he turned, she was already staring at him, not like a master looks at a servant, but like someone studying something carefully, too carefully. "Come here," she said. He stepped forward slowly. Every instinct in his body told him something was wrong, but there was no refusing her. There never was. She leaned slightly closer, and for a moment, it looked like she was about to whisper something important, something dangerous. Instead, she smiled, a small, controlled smile. "I need your help tonight." That was it. No explanation, no details, just a sentence that felt heavier than it should. Samuel nodded, because again, there was no choice. But that night, when the sun dropped and the house went quiet, everything changed. The hallway was darker than usual. Candles had been put out early. The air felt still, too still. Samuel waited where she told him to, near the back corridor, the part of the house no one used anymore. He had never liked that side. The wood creaked differently there. The walls felt colder, and sometimes it almost felt like the house itself was breathing. Then he heard it, her footsteps, slow, precise, not rushed, not hesitant, like she had done this before. Many times, she appeared at the end of the hallway, holding a lantern, but the light didn't reach her eyes. "Come," she said softly. No greeting, no explanation, just that one word. Samuel followed, step by step, deeper into the house, past rooms that had been locked for years, past doors that no one opened, until they reached one, a door that looked different, older, scratched, like something had tried to get out or get in. Alina stopped in front of it. For a moment, she didn't move. Her hand hovered over the handle, and Samuel noticed something that made his chest tighten. Her hand was shaking, not violently, but just enough to show this wasn't normal, not even for her. Then she turned slightly and looked at him. "Once we go inside, you must do exactly what I say." Her voice was still calm, but now there was something else. Urgency. Samuel swallowed, nodded again, because again there was no choice. She opened the door, slowly, and what waited inside was not what he expected. The room was almost empty. No furniture, no windows, just bare wooden walls and a single chair in the center. But it wasn't the emptiness that felt wrong. It was the air, thick, heavy, like stepping into a place that had been sealed for too long. Samuel hesitated at the doorway, but Alina stepped in without pause. She walked to the center of the room, then turned. Close the door. That's when his heart started beating faster, because something in his mind whispered, "If you close that door, something will happen. Something you won't be able to undo." But her eyes were on him, waiting, watching. So he did it. The door shut with a dull, heavy sound. And then something clicked. Not the handle, not the wood, something deeper, like a lock that wasn't supposed to be there. Samuel turned back toward her, and that's when he noticed. She was no longer looking at him. She was looking at the floor, right beneath the chair. And then she said something that made his entire body go cold. "Do you hear it?" At first, he didn't, just silence. Then slowly, very slowly, a sound began to rise. Faint, almost impossible to catch. A scratching noise, coming from below. Samuel froze, because whatever was under that floor was not supposed to be there. And the worst part, Alina didn't look afraid anymore. She looked relieved. And that's when she whispered, "It's awake." For a few seconds, Samuel didn't move. Not because he didn't understand what she said, but because his body refused to react. "It's awake." Those words didn't feel like fear. They felt like confirmation, like she had been waiting for this moment. The scratching beneath the floor grew louder, not aggressive, not desperate, but steady, deliberate, as if whatever was down there knew exactly what it was doing. Samuel took a small step back. The wooden boards beneath his feet creaked softly, and the scratching stopped. Instantly, the silence that followed was worse than the sound, because now it felt like something was listening, waiting. Alina slowly lifted her head. A faint smile touched her lips. "You felt that, didn't you?" Her voice was softer now, almost gentle. Samuel didn't answer. He couldn't, because in that moment, he realized something terrifying. The thing below them was reacting to him. Not her, him. "Come closer," she said. He shook his head slightly without thinking. It was the first time he had ever resisted, and the look in her eyes changed. Not anger, not disappointment, something sharper, something more dangerous. "Don't make this difficult," she whispered. Samuel forced himself to move, one step, then another, until he stood just a few feet from the chair. The wood beneath him felt different here, weaker, hollow, like there was nothing supporting it from below. The scratching started again, louder this time, faster, almost excited. Samuel's breathing grew shallow. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but the door behind him felt too far away, and Alina was standing between him and it. "Good," she murmured. Then she did something unexpected. She walked past him, slowly, carefully, until she reached the door. Samuel turned, watching her, confused, fear building in his chest. She placed her hand on the handle, and for a moment, it looked like she was going to open it. Instead, she locked it, from the inside. The sound was soft, but final. Samuel's heart dropped. "Why?" he managed to whisper. His voice barely came out. Alina didn't turn immediately. When she did, her expression was completely different now. The calmness was gone. The softness was gone. What remained was something raw, something that had been hiding beneath her skin for weeks. "Because it doesn't listen to me anymore," she said quietly. The scratching beneath the floor suddenly stopped again. This time, it didn't start back up. Instead, there was a new sound, a low, subtle shift, like something repositioning itself. Directly under him, Samuel stepped back instinctively, but the floorboard beneath his foot gave a slight crack. He froze, every muscle in his body locked. Alina watched him carefully, almost analyzing him. "It chooses," she continued, her voice trembling slightly now. "Not me, not anyone else." Samuel's chest tightened. "What is it?" he asked. The question hung in the air, heavy. Alina's lips parted slightly. But before she could answer, the floor moved. Not enough to break, not enough to collapse, just enough to rise, like something underneath had pressed against it. Samuel stumbled back, falling against the wall. His eyes locked onto the center of the room, the chair, the floor beneath it. It lifted again, slowly, pushing upward, and then a crack. A thin line split across the wood. The scratching returned, but now it wasn't just scratching. It was pushing, forcing, trying to break through. Samuel's breath caught in his throat. "Make it stop," he said quickly. But Alina didn't move, didn't react. She just stood there watching. "No," she whispered. "It has to see you." Those words didn't make sense until the crack widened and something pale forced its way through. At first, it looked like a hand, but not a normal one, too long, too thin. The fingers stretched unnaturally, bending at angles that didn't look human. Samuel let out a sharp breath and pressed himself harder against the wall. The hand gripped the edge of the broken wood and pulled. More of it began to emerge. Another hand, then a portion of something darker behind it, a shape that didn't fully belong in the light. Samuel shook his head. "No, no, no." But his voice didn't matter. Nothing mattered now, because whatever this was coming out. And Alina still wasn't afraid. If anything, she looked desperate. "Please," she whispered suddenly, her voice cracking for the first time. "Please, take him instead." Samuel's eyes snapped toward her, confusion cutting through the fear. "What?" But before he could say anything else, the creature stopped, half emerged, frozen in place. Its fingers tightened against the wood. Slowly, very slowly, its head began to rise into view. But Samuel couldn't fully see its face. Not clearly, because the lantern light flickered violently. Shadows stretching across the room, distorting everything. But he saw enough to know this wasn't something that had ever been human. The creature turned its head slightly, not toward Alina, but toward him. Samuel's chest tightened painfully, because in that moment, he understood what she meant. It chooses, and it had chosen him. He pushed himself off the wall, desperation taking over, and ran toward the door. But he was too late. The moment his hand touched the handle, something grabbed his ankle. Cold, tight, unnaturally strong. He fell hard against the floor, the air knocked out of his lungs. He twisted, trying to kick free, but the grip only tightened, dragging him, slowly, back toward the center of the room, back toward the hole. "Help me," he shouted, his voice breaking. But Alina didn't move. She couldn't. She just stood there, shaking, watching it happen. Because this was the moment she had been trying to avoid. For weeks, for months, maybe longer. The creature pulled harder. Samuel clawed at the wooden floor, fingernails scraping, splintering, trying to stop himself. But it didn't matter. Nothing could stop it now. And just before he was pulled close enough to see the darkness inside that opening, he looked up at her one last time and asked the question that would haunt that house forever. "You knew, didn't you?" Alina's lips trembled. Her eyes filled with something that looked like regret. But she didn't answer, because the truth was already too obvious. And then Samuel disappeared into the darkness. The floor snapped shut. Silence filled the room again, and Alina collapsed to her knees. But the worst part, this wasn't the first time. and it wouldn't be the last. For a long moment, there was nothing. No sound, no movement, no sign that anything had just happened. The room returned to stillness so quickly, it almost felt unreal, like Samuel had never been there at all. Alina remained on her knees, her hands trembling against the wooden floor, her breath shallow, uneven. She didn't cry. Not yet, because somewhere deep inside, she had expected this. Not the way it happened, not how fast, but the outcome she had known. The silence stretched, heavy, oppressive, and then a faint sound, not from below, from the walls. A soft, dragging noise, like something shifting behind them. Alina slowly lifted her head, her eyes scanning the room. The door was still locked. The chair still stood in the center. The floor perfectly sealed again, but something had changed. She could feel it. The air was thicker now, colder, and then she heard it. A whisper, not loud, not clear, but unmistakable. More. Alina's breath caught, her body stiffened, because that voice, it was Samuel, and it wasn't human. More, this time it was louder, closer, coming from everywhere at once. The walls, the floor, even the ceiling. Alina shook her head. No, she whispered. You said one. Her voice cracked as the words left her mouth, because she wasn't speaking to the room. She was speaking to it, whatever it was, whatever lived beneath that floor. For a few seconds, nothing responded. And then, a sudden knock from directly under the chair. Alina flinched violently, her eyes snapped toward it. Another knock followed, slower, heavier, not random, intentional, like a message, like a demand. More, the whisper returned, clearer this time, stronger. Alina pushed herself back, shaking her head harder now. No, I did what you wanted, she said quickly. I brought him. I did exactly what you asked. Her voice was rising, desperation slipping through. I can't do this again. The room went silent, completely silent. And for a brief moment, Alina thought it was over. That maybe she had done enough. Then the chair moved, just slightly, scraping against the wooden floor on its own. Alina froze, because no one was touching it. No one was near it. The lantern flickered again, shadows bending unnaturally across the walls. And then the chair turned, slowly, facing her, empty, but not really, because as she stared at it, something began to form. A shape, faint at first, like smoke, then darker, more solid, a figure, sitting in the chair. Alina's breath stopped, because she recognized it immediately. The outline, the posture, the size. Samuel, she whispered. The figure didn't respond, didn't move, but its head tilted slightly. And that was enough. Enough to confirm this wasn't him. Not anymore. The shape leaned forward slowly, too slowly. Its movements delayed, unnatural, like it was learning how to exist in this space. And then it spoke. You promised. The voice was wrong, layered, like multiple tones trying to speak at once. Alina shook her head violently. No, no, I didn't promise this, she said, her eyes filled with panic now. Real panic. I gave you what you wanted. The figure didn't react. It simply stood, rising from the chair in a way that didn't follow normal motion, like it wasn't bound by the same rules. You promised, it repeated. Alina scrambled backward, pressing against the wall. I didn't know it would take him, she cried. I didn't know. The figure took one step forward, and the room seemed to tighten, like the space itself was shrinking. You knew, it said. This time the voice was clearer, sharper, more focused. Alina's body went still, because deep down she did know. Not everything, not exactly how it worked, but enough. Enough to understand the risk, enough to understand the cost. Her silence confirmed it, and the figure moved again, closer, each step slow, controlled, inevitable. You opened the door, it continued. You fed it. Alina covered her ears. No, you let it grow. Stop, and now it paused, right in front of her. It's hungry. Alina screamed, not out of fear, but out of realization. Because this wasn't just about one person. This wasn't just about Samuel. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't satisfied, and it wasn't going to stop. The lantern suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the room completely. Alina's breathing filled the space. Fast, panicked, alone. Or at least she thought she was, until something touched her face. Soft, cold, familiar. She froze, because she knew that feeling. Not from tonight, from before. From the very first time she had entered this room. The night everything began. The night she made the worst mistake of her life. And as the darkness pressed in around her, a voice whispered right next to her ear. You brought the first one willingly. A pause. Long enough for the words to sink in. Now bring the rest. Alina's body collapsed. Her strength gone. Her mind breaking under the weight of what she had done. Because now there was no escaping this. Not for her. Not for anyone in that house. And far below, something moved again. Not scratching, not knocking, but shifting, like it was preparing for what came next. Morning came like it always did, quiet. Golden light stretching across the fields. Soft wind moving through the crops. The kind of calm that made everything feel normal again. But inside the house, nothing was normal anymore. Alina was gone from her room. No one saw her leave. No one heard her walk the halls. But something had changed. The servants felt it immediately. That same heaviness in the air, but stronger now. Thicker, like something had spread. By midday, whispers started moving between them. Samuel was missing, gone without a trace. No one asked questions out loud, because they already knew the answer they weren't allowed to say. And then she appeared, Alina, walking slowly down the main staircase, dressed perfectly, face calm, eyes empty. not the distant emptiness from before, but something deeper, something final. She didn't look at anyone, didn't speak. She simply walked through the house like nothing had happened, like the night didn't exist. But one thing was different. She wasn't alone anymore. Not really. Because wherever she moved, that feeling followed. Like something unseen was walking just behind her, watching, waiting. And later that night, she called another name. A different boy this time. Older, stronger, but just as powerless. He stepped forward the same way Samuel had, hesitant, confused, but obedient. Because in that house, you didn't refuse. "Come with me," she said, the exact same words, the exact same tone. And just like before, she led him down the hallway, past the unused rooms, toward the same door. Only this time, she didn't hesitate. She didn't stop. She didn't even look at it. She opened it immediately, like she had accepted what it was, what she had become. The boy slowed behind her, something in him sensing danger. "Ma'am, what is this room?" he asked quietly. Alina didn't answer. She stepped inside, turned, and waited. The boy looked back down the hallway. For a brief second, it felt like he might run, like he might break the pattern. But fear held him in place. Not fear of the room, fear of her. So he stepped inside, and the door closed behind him. Another soft click, another lock, another moment that couldn't be undone. And beneath the floor, the sound returned, louder than before, stronger, not just one point now, multiple, scratching, moving, growing. Alina stood still, watching the center of the room, her face expressionless, but her hands shaking, not from doubt, not anymore, from anticipation, because now she understood. It wasn't about feeding it once. It wasn't about making it stop. It was about keeping it satisfied for as long as possible. The boy stepped back. What is that?" he whispered. Alina finally spoke, her voice empty, detached. "It's too late to ask questions." The floor cracked, faster this time, wider, more aggressive. And from the darkness below, more hands began to rise. Not one, not two, but many, reaching, stretching, clawing toward the surface. The boy screamed, tried to run, but just like before, something grabbed him and dragged him down, his voice echoing against the walls before being swallowed completely. Silence followed, but not for long, because this time the floor didn't fully close. Small gaps remained, thin cracks, and from those cracks, something dark began to seep out, spreading slowly across the wood, like it was no longer contained. Alina stared at it, and for the first time, she looked afraid again, because she realized something too late. Feeding it wasn't controlling it. It was freeing it. Days passed, then weeks. More people disappeared, quietly, carefully, never all at once, always just enough to keep suspicion low. But the house was changing. The walls felt closer, the air colder, the nights longer, and the sounds never stopped anymore. Not scratching, not knocking, but movement, constant movement, like something was no longer below, but inside, everywhere. The servants stopped sleeping, stopped speaking, stopped looking at each other, because they all knew they were waiting their turn. And Alina, she kept going, day after day, night after night, calling names, leading them to the room, locking the door, watching it happen, because she believed if she stopped, it would come for her. Until one night, she didn't call anyone. The house was quiet, too quiet. Alina stood alone in the hallway, staring at the door, the same door, the only door that mattered anymore. Her hand slowly reached for the handle, but this time she wasn't bringing anyone with her, because she had heard it again. That whisper, closer than ever, stronger than ever. More, but this time it didn't sound like a demand. It sounded like a decision. Alina pushed the door open. The room was different now. The floor was no longer solid. Large sections had collapsed inward, darkness visible beneath, moving, breathing, alive. And in the center, the chair was gone, replaced by something else, something shifting, something waiting. Alina stepped inside slowly, her body trembling, her mind finally breaking under the weight of it all. "I gave you everything," she whispered, her voice barely there. "I did everything you asked." The darkness moved, rising slightly, responding. And then it spoke, not from one place, from everywhere. "You gave what we took." Alina froze, because that wasn't the agreement. That wasn't "we choose," it continued. Her breath stopped, her heart pounding in her ears. And then she understood. It was never her control, never her choice. She was never feeding it. She was helping it hunt. And now there was no one left to offer, no one left to protect her. The floor beneath her shifted, slowly giving way. Alina stepped back, but the ground cracked under her weight. Her foot slipped, and for the first time, there was no one to pull her back, no one to save her. Her hands clawed at the edge of the broken wood, desperately trying to hold on. But the darkness below was already reaching up, cold fingers wrapping around her wrists, pulling, steady, unstoppable. Alina screamed, louder than anyone before her. But no one came. No one ever came. Because by then, there was no one left in the house. Only silence. And whatever lived beneath it. Her grip slipped. Her body dragged closer to the edge, closer to the darkness. And just before she disappeared completely, she saw something. Deep inside, not one creature, not one shape, but many, watching, waiting, endless. And then she was gone. The floor collapsed inward before slowly sealing itself again. Like nothing had ever happened. The house stood still, empty, quiet, but not abandoned. Because sometimes, late at night, if you stand close enough to the walls, you can still hear it. Not scratching, not knocking, but breathing, slow, deep, patient, waiting for someone new to open the door. And when they do, it won't ask, it won't wait, it will choose. So if you ever find yourself in a place that feels too quiet, where the air feels heavier than it should, and the floor sounds hollow beneath your feet, don't stay. Don't look back. And whatever you do, don't open the door. If you made it this far, comment below what you think was really inside that house. And don't forget to share this story with someone who loves dark mysteries. Because some stories don't end when they're told. They wait